Welcome, 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 my brothers and sisters. Today I will read the last sections of paper 82, which was all about the evolution of marriage. The last sections we will go through today is marriage under the property Moors, endogamy and exogamy, and racial mixtures is the last we end with. So the next time we start paper 83, and this paper is all about the institution of marriage. And then we have another paper that is paper 84, and this paper will be all about marriage and family life, but that is for later on. So let us dive into this topic. Let us dive into these and through these last sections. Let us see, hear, and read what the Urantia book is telling us today. All right. Screen share so that everybody can read along. And I advise you to go to the urantia.org/Urantia book standardized to read it all for yourself. You can see the link, and to reread this text, this entire paper yourself with the help of the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of truth. All right, let us start. Section 4, Marriage under the Property Moors, paper 82, Urantia book, section 3, History of Urantia. Marriage has always been closely linked with both property and religion. Property has been the stabilizer of marriage, religion the moralizer. Primitive marriage was an investment, an economic speculation. It was more a matter of business than an affair of flirtation. The ancients married for the advantage and welfare of the group, wherefore their marriages were planned and arranged by the group, their parents and elders, and that the property Moors were effective in stabilizing the marriage institution is borne out of the fact that marriage was more permanent among the early tribes than it is among many modern peoples. As civilization advanced and private property gained further recognition in the Moors, stealing became the great crime. Adultery was recognized as a form of stealing, an infringement of the husband's property rights. It is not therefore specifically mentioned in the earlier codes and Moors. Woman started out as the property of her father, who transferred his title to her husband, and all legalized sex relations grew out of these pre-existent property rights. The Old Testament deals with women as a form of property. The Quran teaches their inferiority. Man had the right to lend his wife to a friend or guest, and this custom still obtains among certain peoples. Modern sex jealousy is not innate, it is a product of the evolving Moors. Primitive man was not jealous of his wife, he was just guarding his property. The reason for holding the wife to stricter sex account than the husband was because her marital infidelity involved descent and inheritance. Very early in the march of civilization, the illegitimate child fell into disrepute, At first, only the woman was punished for adultery. Later on, the Moors also decreed the chastisement of her partner, and for long ages, the offended husband or the protector father had the full right to kill the male trespasser. Modern peoples retain these mores, which allow so-called crimes of honor under the unwritten law. Since the chastity taboo had its origin as a phase of the property mores, it applied at first to married women, but not to unmarried girls. In later years, chastity was more demanded by the father than by the suitor. A virgin was a commercial asset to the father. She brought a higher price. As chastity came more into demand, it was the practice to pay the father a bride fee in recognition of the service of properly rearing a, a chaste bride for the husband to be. When one started, this idea of female chastity took such hold on the races that it became the practice literally to cage up girls, actually to imprison them for years in order to assure their virginity. And so the more recent standards and virginity tests automatically gave origin to the professional prostitute classes. They were the rejected brides, those women who were found by the grooms' mothers not to be virgins. Section 5, Endogamy and Exogamy. Very early, the savage observed that race mixture improved the quality of the offspring. It was not that inbreeding was always bad, but that outbreeding was always comparatively better. Therefore, the Moors tended to crystallize in restriction of sex relations among near relatives. It was recognized that outbreeding greatly increased the selective opportunity for evolutionary variation and advancement. The outbred individual were more versatile and had greater ability to survive in a hostile world. The inbreeders, together with their Moors, gradually disappeared. This was all a slow development. The savage did not consciously reason about such problems, but the later and advancing peoples did, and they also made the observation that general weakness sometimes resulted from excessive inbreeding, while the inbreeding of good stock sometimes resulted in the upbuilding of strong tribes. The spectacular cases of the bad results of the inbreeding of hereditary defectives more forcibly impressed the mind of man, with the result that the advancing Moors increasingly formulated taboos against all marriages among near relatives. Religion has long been an effective barrier against outmarriage. Many religious teachings have proscribed marriage outside the faith. Woman has usually favored the practice of in-marriage, man outer, and the man out marriage. Property has always influenced marriage, and sometimes in an effort to conserve property within a clan, Moors have arisen compelling women to choose husbands within their fathers' tribes. Rulings of this sort led to a great multiplication of cousin marriages. Inmating was also practiced in an effort to preserve craft secrets. Skilled workmen sought to keep the knowledge of their craft within the family. Superior groups, when isolated, always reverted to consanguineous mating. The Nodites, for over 150,000 years, were one of the great in-marriage groups. The later day in-marriage Moors were tremendously influenced by the traditions of the Violet race, in which at first matings were perforce between brother and sister. And brother and sister marriages were common in early Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia, and throughout the lands once occupied by the Andites. The Egyptians long practiced brother and sister marriages in an effort to keep the royal blood pure, a custom which persisted even longer in Persia and still is in existence. Among the Mesopotamians before the days of Abraham, cousin marriages were obligatory. Cousins had prior marriage rights to cousins. Abraham himself married his half-sister, but such unions were not allowed under the later mores of the Jews. The first move away from brother and sister marriages came about under the plural wife mores, because the sister wife would arrogantly dominate the other wife or wives. Some tribal Moors forbade marriage to a dead brother's widow, but required the living brother to beget children for his departed brother. There is no biologic instinct against any degree of in-marriage. Such restrictions are wholly a matter of taboo. Out-marriage finally dominated because it was favored by the man. To get a wife from the outside ensured greater freedom from in-laws. Familiarity breeds contempt, so as the element of individual choice began to dominate mating, it became the custom to choose partners from outside the tribe. Many tribes finally forbade marriages within the clan, others limited mating to certain castes. The taboo against marriage with a woman of one's own totem gave impetus to the custom of stealing women from neighboring tribes. Later on, marriages were regulated more in accordance with territorial residence than with kinship. There were many steps in the evolution of in-marriage into the modern practice of out-marriage. Even after the taboo rested upon in-marriages for the common people, chiefs and kings were permitted to marry those of close kin in order to keep the royal blood concentrated and pure. The Moors have usually permitted sovereign rulers certain license in sex matters. The presence of the later Andite peoples had much to do with increasing the desire of the Sungig races to mate outside their own tribes, but it was not possible for outmating to become prevalent under neighboring groups had learned to live together in relative peace. Outmarriage itself was a peace promoter. Marriages between the tribes lessened hostilities. Outmarriage led to tribal coordination and to military alliances. This is quite interesting, this last one. It became dominant because it provided increased strength. It was a nation builder. Outmarriage was also greatly favored by increasing trade contacts. Adventure and exploration contributed to the extension of the mating bounds and greatly facilitated the cross-fertilization of racial cultures. The otherwise inexplicable inconsistencies of the racial marriage Moors are largely due to this out-marriage custom, with its accompanying wife stealing and buying from foreign tribes, all of which resulted in a compounding of the separate tribal Moors. That these taboos respecting in marriage were sociologic, not biologic. It is well illustrated by the taboos on kinship marriages, which embraced many degrees of in-law relationships, cases representing no blood relation whatsoever. And then point 6, the last of today, racial mixtures. There are no pure races in the world today. The early and original evolutionary peoples of color have only two representative races persisting in the world, the yellow man and the black man. The yellow Sangik are what we call the Asians, and the black man, and even these two races are much admixed with the extinct colored peoples. Doesn't mean that the DNA of these extinct colored peoples are not in our DNA, because it is so. While the so-called white race is predominantly descended from the ancient blue man, it is admixed more or less with all other races, much as is the red man of the Americas. Of the 6 colored Sangik races, 3 were primary and 3 were secondary. Though the primary races, the blue, the red, and the yellow, were in many respects superior to the 3 secondary peoples, it should be remembered that these secondary races had many desirable traits which would have considerably enhanced the primary peoples if their better strains could have been absorbed. Present-day prejudice against half-castes, so-called hybrids, and mongrels arises because modern racial crossbreeding is, for the greater part, between the grossly inferior strains of the races concerned. You also get unsatisfactory offspring when the degenerate strains of the same race intermarry. If the present-day races of Urantia could be freed from the curse of their lowest strata of deteriorated, antisocial, feeble-minded, and outcast specimens, there would be little objection to a limited race amalgamation. And if such racial mixtures could take place between the highest types of the several races, still less objection could be offered. Hybridization of superior and dissimilar stocks is the secret of the creation of new and more vigorous strains, and this is true of plants, animals, and the human species. Hybridization augments vigor and increases fertility. Race mixtures of the average or superior strata of various peoples greatly increase creative potential, as is shown in the present population of the United States of North America. When such matings take place between the lower or inferior strata, creativity is diminished, as is shown by the present-day peoples of southern India. Race blending greatly contributes to the sudden appearance of new characteristics, and if such hybridization is the union of superior strains, then these new characteristics will also be superior traits. As long as present-day races are so overloaded with inferior and degenerate strains. Race intermingling on a large scale would be most detrimental or detrimental. But most of the objections to such experiments rest on social and cultural prejudices rather than on biological consideration. Even among inferior stocks, hybrids often are an improvement on their ancestors. Hybridization makes for species improvement because of the role of the dominant genes. Racial intermixtures increases the likelihood of a larger number of the desirable dominants being present in the hybrid. For the past 100 years, more racial hybridization has been taking place on Urantia that has occurred in thousands of years. The danger of gross disharmonies as a result of crossbreeding of human stocks has been greatly exaggerated. The chief troubles of so-called half-breeds are due to social prejudices. The Pitcairn experiment of blending the white and Polynesian races turned out very well because the white men and the Polynesian women were of fairly good racial strains. Interbreeding between the highest types of the white, red and yellow races would immediately bring into existence many new and biologically effective characteristics. These three peoples belong to the primary Sungaic races. Mixtures of the white and black races are not so desirable in their immediate results. Neither are such mulatto offspring so objectionable as social and racial prejudice would seek to make them appear. Physically, such white-black hybrids are excellent specimens of humanity, notwithstanding their slight inferiority in some other respects. When a primary Sungaic race amalgamates with a secondary Sungaic race, the latter is considerably improved at the expense of the former, and on a small scale extending over long periods of time, there can be little serious objection to such a sacrificial contribution by the primary races to the betterment of the secondary groups. Biologically considered, the secondary Sungaics were in some respects superior to the primary races. After all, the real jeopardy of the human species is to be found in the unrestrained multiplication of the inferior and degenerate strains of the various civilized peoples, rather than in any supposed danger of their racial interbreeding. And so with this said, I have come to the end of reading the last sections of paper 82, which was all about the evolution of marriage. This was an interesting paper, and all the information in this paper has been presented to us by the chief of Seraphim stationed on Urantia. So thank you, Chief of Seraphim stationed on Urantia, for giving us this information. I advise you to re-listen and to reread this entire paper with the help excuse me with the help of the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of truth, and to ask them to help you to get more in-depth understanding and clarification of what is truly being said here, and also to show you the examples in society, to be found in society, that confirms at least the last section of this paper. All right, let us go out and let us go to the end. All right. I want to say thank you so much for listening and rereading along with me. Thank you for listening to all these live book readings. Please share them with your fellow brothers and sisters, and spreading the seed forward, because that is what I'm doing. By presenting you this information, I am spreading the seed forward of this Urantia book. It's a book with a lot of information that people of today need to know to get more understanding of their history, and also to find the misinformation in all that has been taught to us. So it is a very important information for us, so that we can see, okay, what has been left out of the equation, and which we in actuality should have known. All right. Thank you so much, and God bless you. And also, please give service to your fellow brothers and sisters, as Jesus also has taught us to do. And then I go out.